for Women Association. So before the session start, I would like to share some information about the communication during the event between speakers and moderators. So we will use the Google Meeting chat to communicate directly with you during the event. And please notice that we will send out time reminders to the chat box when the time is when the time is only 3 minutes and 1 minute left. And also, we will give you last reminders when your time is up.
立想在那里耶，立想，还说立想呢。
And during the event, if you have anything you want to communicate with our staff, you can also use the chat box as well. And our event will start in 1 minute. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the NGO CSW 66 Forum Parallel event hosted by Asia Pacific Liberal Women Association. We welcome you to join our session. And today we have our honorable moderator and speakers will share their experience on government policy for substantial carbon reductions in the following 1 hour and 30 minutes. And before the session starts, I would like to welcome the chairperson of Asia Pacific Liberal Women Association, Mei-Xin Yang, to give us opening remarks.
Thank you, Annie. Good morning, good evening to the people in the United States, and good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to attend this important event. Each year, 2 weeks after the World Women's Day, there's March 8th. There are more than 2,000 women all around the world go to New York City to attend the UNCSW as the Commission on the Status of Women parallel events. There were about more than 400 forums taking place. Due to the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, this year, CSW 66, all side events and parallel events are fully virtual online. Representatives of the United Nations, UN entities, and the NGOs from all regions of the world are invited to contribute to the session. APLW, Asia Pacific Liberal Women, is proud to be a part of his family. Each of us has been feel the weather has been changed dramatically. Flood, sea level rise, very heated weather in the summer. It affects our daily life. What can we do? What kind of the government policy should help? Today, we are very honored to have world specialists to address those issues. The first speaker of this panel are Honorable U.S. Congressman Ed Case from Hawaii. He has been focused on the Asia Pacific and environmental protection. I want to thank you for your support, Taiwan. The second speaker is Dr. Eugene Chen. He is Ambassador at Large for Climate Change and Sustainability. He was the former Minister of the Foreign Affairs, Minister of the Transportation, Minister of the Environmental Protection Administration. Among so many areas, he chose sustainability to be the goal of his life. The third speaker will be Dr. Monty from Thailand, former parliamentarian of Thailand, Democrat Party. Dr. Monty is on the board of many international and environmental protection institutions. Thank you to join with us. The fourth speaker will be Barbara Gilmore. She is a distinguished attorney in the environmental law and the clean energy. She has been focused on China. She wrote a book, Where China Saved the World. She lived in US for more than 10 years with her husband, who is Steve Young, the former director of the AIT. And he was very popular in Taiwan. We all love this couple. Our moderator is Dr. Katie Chen. She is the Vice President of Taiwan Foundation for Democracy. She is also board member of APLW. She is a political scientist with a heart to make Taiwan better, and make Taiwan not to the world. If anyone say Taiwan is the beacon of Asia democracy, I would say through her hard working, she made it to be known. Thanks to the co-sponsor organization, which are INFW, the headquarters of International Network of Liberal Women, Taiwanese Association of America, North America Taiwanese Women's Organization, DPP Women's Department. My special thanks to the main organizer of this event, Joseph Wu. Also, Secretary General Andrew Wu, colleague Greg Chen, Annie Chan, Volterra, and Anthony Carrier. Yes, last night I received a very interesting message from a Japanese friend. I sent him the invitation, and he returned me saying, "Your husband must be like me, very afraid of the wife." I didn't reply yet, but I would like to say, we as women understand we are the indispensable role of women. Women is in the front line of the daily life. We just need men and women's cooperation. We work together, and there is the slogan of the United Nations, he for she, make a better world. Thank you very much for your participation and attention. Now I would like to hand over to the moderator. Here is Katie Chen.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Yang, for such a kind. So this is the first side event of the 66 CSW event. And this year's theme is climate change, environment disaster risk reduction, gender equality at the center of solution. So I really think that the theme of this year's CSW is really essential and very timely. As Ambassador Yang Huang just said, we have 4 very esteemed speakers for this really important panel that's titled Government Policy for Substantial Carbon Reduction, where we will discuss topics such as environmental protection, carbon reduction, environmental protection challenges under global warming, and of course, proposed policy suggestions of how we proceed into the future. I just wanted to say that last year at COP26, Taiwan actually sent a multi-agency delegation to Glasgow, and they hosted the Taiwan Day. And at the same COP26, Taiwan actually pledged a net zero emission by 2020. And Taiwan has its green energy offshore wind farm that started in 2019. So when it comes to green energies and environmental protection and carbon reduction, Taiwan working very diligently to trying to adhere to international standards. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers. And of course, as Ambassador Yang Huang already said, we have Congressman Ed Case. He is the member of the U.S. House of Representatives in Hawaii's 1st Congressional District. And he has been serving there since 2019. He also serves on the Appropriation Committee and Natural Resource Committee. He is also co-chair of the Pacific Island Caucus and is active in many caucuses focused on the Asia Pacific and environmental protection. And secondly, we have Dr. Eugene Chen. He is the ambassador at large for climate change and sustainability of Taiwan. And Dr. Jen's CV really, he is does not need further introduction. He served as Taiwan's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Transportation and Communications, and also Minister of the Environmental Protection Administration. Thirdly, we have Dr. Seritara Tabukanan. She is the former member of the Parliament of Thailand, and she is the Democratic Party. She previously held key positions at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Thailand, including the post of Principal Inspector General, Director General of the Department of Environment Quality Promotion, Deputy Permanent Secretary, and Director General of the Pollution Control Department. And until recently, she served as Senior Advisor to the Senate and House of Representatives Commissions on Natural Resources and Environment. So she will bring to the table her very vast experience on environmental protection. And last but not least is Ms. Barbara Fenimore. She is the Senior Visiting Research Fellow at Oxford Institute of Energy Studies. She has been devoting herself into environmental advocacy for over past 4 decades. She is experienced in environmental law and clean energy policy. More founded the China program of the Natural Resources Defense Council, the first clean energy program launched in China by an international NGO. So she also brought her perspective as an environmental policy advocate for the past 4 decades. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Congressman Case to make the first presentation. Thank you very much and welcome, sir. Yeah, so Congressman Case, the floor is yours.
Congressman is not arrived yet. Maybe we get.
Excuse me, I was still in contact with him. He having trouble get online, and I just send him another time of the meeting link again. Can we switch the frequency of the speaker so he can get online later?
Okay, so while Congressman Case is figuring out his audio situation, if I may, my apologies to Minister and Dr. Jen, if you could make the first presentation to the rest of the participants. So Minister Jen, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good evening. My topic is focus on Taiwan sustainability milestones and the challenges, because the topics really, today's topic is really big. So I focus on small side, how NGO to address the problem, to support the government policy, and to support the work to combat with climate change. Okay, yeah, just a moment. Yeah, okay. Well, as a civil group, as concerned, so the most important job for the civil group is for doing initiative, education, exposition, conference, policy platform, and trusted third party, and also the public opinion poll. According to these guidelines, I will explain how my NGO is doing the job to combat with climate change. So first one, I like to introduce myself very quickly. We have 5 core initiatives. One is climate change. Second is sustainable energy. The third is corporate sustainability. Then is the university sustainability. Then sustainable development goals. In 2021, we organized about 162 events. Personally, I delivered about more than 50 speeches. Most of the speeches aim for the high government officials and the board of directors of the company. In the meantime, I have about more than 100 radio shows among 15 radio stations in Taiwan. And together we have organized about 46,000 people attended. Came from 43 countries in Taiwan. So we started that from 2007, then up to date. So first I will talk about what the people think in Taiwan about climate change. So every year we conduct a survey about the opinion in Taiwan about the climate change. So I just give you, for instance, like this. Do you believe in the status of the climate change globally, emergency globally? And in Taiwan is quite amazing. More than 90% of people, they do believe climate change is really a serious problem. The second, I ask them, do you believe Taiwan will be affected by climate change? It's also quite high. More than 77% of people, they do believe Taiwan already affected by the climate change. Then third one, do you support renewable energy development in Taiwan? And the poll shows more than 3/4 of people, they do support. So that is a mindset about the people in Taiwan. So our NGO TASTE, we lead the sustainability in Taiwan through inspiration and education. So we start from education, we conduct a competition, we have a very big judge group doing the judge, how people and the business and the company doing a good job or not for the sustainability or climate change, then we offer the award. Not only in Taiwan, we also offer the global award for companies and institutions. Then we present the best practice models. Now we have seminars, workshops, alliance. Finally, this year we will stage a huge exposition in Taiwan. So now I start from education. So in order to have a good idea about what's really changed for the climate change doing for us, so we are facing the major change in 2030. So the most important, we must have the consensus. So we start from mentality consensus. Then we have the behavior change and action. Then we're doing for development and sustainability. So we need that for is production change, lifestyle change, market business model change. That is our theme to the people. So our education to our target is the government, company, students, teachers, and the public. So for instance, the first one, we are aiming for the elementary school students, start from age 6 to age 15. So last year, we have 37 countries and regions participated in this competition. Totally about 19,000 students participate. It's quite amazing. They are doing really good job, and they understand, they get it from they just mix their talent with the painting and knowing the idea what happened for the climate change. Every year we have different theme. This last year theme is for the forestry and ocean, and this year is for food. So in order to have very good understanding about the climate change, so we conduct the volunteer judge programs. So in the last 6 years, we already trained about more than 6,000 people, that among the professionals and among the university professors and the students. And last year, we have more than 800 people participated in conducting how to judge the good company, good university, or good hospitals. Then competition. The competition, you can see that we integrate all the SDGs, the content. So we have, for instance, we have a Human Rights Leadership Award. We have a Gender Equality Award. We have a Climate Change Leadership Award. And we also have the Sustainable Water Management. Through the different competition, so we can recognize most of universities, companies, hospitals, even the government agencies. Are they doing a really good job for climate change or sustainability? Then we have many different kinds of competitions. For instance, we also, besides that painting competition, we also have the micro movie festival. For the micro movie festival, so any people, any company, if it can present about 8 minutes a micro movie, and they can show about what they are doing for the job, for the sustainability, or the climate, or dealing with climate change. And then we give the award. Then we also have the SDGs Academic Paper Award, and we have many kind of award inside or outside Taiwan. So different. Besides that, we also have the Teaching Sustainability Award, and also Living Level Project Award, and also for the Youth Sustainability Leadership Award, and the Taiwan in My Eyes Award. For instance, Excellence in Teaching Sustainability Award, in order to improve or in order to have a better knowledge sharing and the teaching. So we give the award to the university professors. If they have done good job for their courses, we recognize them and give them the award. And also the academic papers. So each year we offer the academic paper award to the students or the professors or even for the companies. If they have done a good job to publish a paper, we give them the award. And so far last year, we have about 150 papers participate. And we have set very big stage to afford award. Then the Taiwan in my eyes, that is for the Taiwan and the foreign students in Taiwan, we offer them the chance, and we offer them the money to travel in Taiwan about 1 week. And after 1 week, they will present what they see in Taiwan about the SDGs and also sustainability work in Taiwan. So right now, in that, we have already conducted 8 times. We have 67 country students participate. You may wonder why in that kind of time of the COVID-19, where the student came from. Because in Taiwan right now, we have more than 100,000 foreign students. So we offer them a chance to see Taiwan. And through this kind of program, they will better understand what we can do for sustainability and how to combat the climate change. Then we also have the Living Level Project Award. So last year, we have 3 countries, people, students and professors with 25 universities, students, professors participate in the Living Level Project. This project is quite long, about 6 months as a period. Then so far, we have about 67 countries and 75 universities participated in all the programs for a sustainability event. Then award the best practice. So this is last year's opening ceremony for the Global Corporate Sustainability Forum. It's quite big, about more than 1,000 people attend that with President Tsai, and sometimes it's the vice president. So it's a very big event, and most of people attend is high companies officials. For instance, in the last year, we have, for those people attend this one, their companies sales volume is more than 1/2 of the GDP, and most of them attend as the chairman and CEO. So that is quite impressive presence for them to receive the honor of the award. So you can see that the last year's pictures with President Tsai and with the distinguished the people. And you can see also the right hand side is award to the Thailand company. So we have initiative and exposition. So in order to establish the platform in Taiwan, we organize the 4 platforms. One is for called Alliance for SDGs. So we have 110 members. We have 38 from universities, and from research institution about 5, and NGO of 16, and 42 companies, and 6 government agencies. So through this platform, we organize many kind of different of the program to do the work. The next one, I talk about universities. We signed the MOU for the agreement with university. Start from the top tiers university, for instance, from National Taiwan University, from the Chenggong University, from Tsinghua University, from Jiao Tong University, from Zhengda, almost distinguished university in Taiwan. After signing the MOU with them, we offer many kind of different agreement and works with them. Then we have 65 corporate members. Those are the big companies. Right now, for that 65 corporate members, their sales volume is more than half the GDP. So you name it, all the big companies like the TSMC, Foxconn, they are all members. So through this kind, we have many kind of seminars and workshops. So we have the university social impact seminars, and we conduct the corporate tour for professors. And we also have CSR university lectures, and we also have the corporate sustainability expert training courses. And we also have the sustainable future workshop. And we also publish the USR and the SDGs news later. So we built up the enterprise network in Taiwan, 65 companies I just mentioned, including 23 from manufacturers and financial industry, 15, and state-owned enterprise, 7 companies, and also service industry, and also the general merchandise retailer trade. And the important is that last year, we organized a new platform called the TANZI. The TANZI is doing for the Taiwan Alliance for Net Zero Emission. Right now, we have 27 companies joining with us. The 27 companies is not really a big number. However, that's all big companies for the big emission companies. For instance, the total amount about emission, CO2 emissions from those companies is about 19% of Taiwan's emission. So you got 1/5 of the emission from our alliance. So our job is that our alliance, the first one, these initiatives, they must commit by 2030 for those companies, their headquarters and office must be reach about net zero emission. Then before 2050, they must have the net zero emission. They must have the public announced commitment for this one and also passed by the board of directors. So that's very important commitment. And every year we check the accountability. So we check their performance every year. They must show us about their emission roadmap, how to do the carbon reduction every year. And we have different programs to deal with it. Sometimes we provide many different kind about information technology service. And as a mediator, and we also invite many kind of the tech companies to support them. So that's including big company like the TSMC and the #1 company in Taiwan, but also the Foxconn, also the big company, the huge company, and also China Steel, and also the Asia Cement, and also Taiwan Cement, and also the Zhonghua Telecom. So most of big companies, they are really interested, and they're also working very hard to do the job for the net zero emission. That's how we organize that alliance. Besides this, actually in Taiwan, many NGO also working very hard to do carbon reduction. For instance, the other NGOs as the ICT industry, they also have the carbon emission among the ICT industries. And also for the different kind of professionals, they also conduct the net zero emission. So net zero emission now is a theme in Taiwan, and the people and industry and the government is really thinking about how to do with the net zero emission in next 30 years. Okay, the last one I just want to share that for exposition. So this year, we staged the Asia Pacific Forum and Exposition for Sustainability in the coming August 12 to 14. And we welcome all the Asia Pacific country companies, agencies, or the hospital, university join with us. Okay, that here I conclude what we have done through the NGO, the TASTE, our NGO to do our work to combat with climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jian, for your very comprehensive presentation on what the Taiwanese private companies and non-governmental organizations were doing in order to reach the goal of net zero emission. It is very good for us to hear that private companies are pledging to announce net zero emission by 2030, and then the government of Taiwan also pledged last year to have net zero emission in 2050. So next, I would like to invite Dr. Modip Saratana Tabukanan from Thailand to make her presentation. Ma'am, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good morning, good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is really my great pleasure and honor to give my talk. Can I show my PowerPoint? I'm waiting. Organizer, please show my PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, so my talk this morning will focus on environmental protection and carbon reduction in Thailand, some considerations. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Sorry,
okay. You can go for the next slide, please.
Next slide.
Next slide, please.
差了，差了，再等。这有的年代，说等一下。你刚讲说等一下。
The next slide.
That is connecting.
Slide cannot run. Cannot run the slide.
Okay, sorry. Just 1 moment.
Can you make it the next slide?
Okay.
Okay. So I will present first Thailand's policy setting. We'll focus on Thailand's 20-year national strategies from 2017 to 2036. Then I will go on the illustrations of activities and challenges with the focus on sea level rise, nature-based solutions, life in the cities, and energy. The last one will be role of civil society and the private sector in Thailand. For example, Global Compact Network Thailand, Bird Conservation Society of Thailand, and need to brace for initial inconveniences. And the last one, education. Next, please. See? Next slide, please. Can you hear?
Yes.
Can you move next slide?
Yes. Ready?
Yeah, next one, please.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
So back to one slide. Back to one slide. 12 national economic.
Sorry, I'll try again.
Okay. So can you make it on the PowerPoint?
Next.
For the 13 National Economic and Social Development Plan of the country 2023 to 2027, we do have draft target implementation include developing human resources for the new world, creating a society of opportunity, and also we focus on creating a social of opportunity and fairness, for example, reducing social inequality, creating sustainability for the country, with the sustainability of the country taking into account the environment and ecosystem, solving environmental problems, and also strengthening the industry and green economy. We do prepare the country to cope with risks and changes in the new global context. Next, please. Next slide, please. So for the policy setting, Thailand utilized sufficiency economy philosophy created by his late Majesty King Bhumibol Adulyadej, 1970s. We provide an overarching pathway to achieve in the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 3 pillars in sufficiency economy philosophy. The first one is moderation, not doing something too little or too much of the expense of overall or others, for example, producing and consuming of a moderate level. Second one is reasonableness. Decide on the level of sufficiency nationally, considering the factors involved and on participation of every outcome. Risk management, preparation to cope with the likely impact and changes in various aspects by considering the probability of future situations. Next, please. Next slide, please. So this is important one now. The government has a very strong policy on bio-circular clean economy model. And this BCG will be used for the next APEC meeting in Thailand this November. All sectors will focus on BCG. I'm also involved in women and economy, focus on BCG. BCG is aligned with sufficiency economy philosophy and also introduced Thai research community promoted by our Thai government as a new economic model for inclusive and sustainable growth. And also Thailand's biological diversity, cultural richness, and technology innovation, value-based innovation-driven Thai economy. And we do conforms with sustainable development goals. Next, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So BCG's model will focus on promoting 4 kinds of industries at the first phase. Focus on food and agriculture, medical and wellness, bioenergy, biomaterial, and biochemical. Last is tourism and creative economy. With these 4 strategies, BCGs will promote sustainability of biological resources, strengthening communities and grassroots economy, upgrading and promoting sustainable competitiveness of Thai BCG industries, focusing in clean manufacturing, and also building resilience to global changes. Next, please. So for the key policy documents, we focus on different kinds of act. The first one is enhancement and conservation of National Environmental Act, National Environmental Quality Act, National Environmental Health Strategic Plan. We have National Parks Law, National Forest Policy, Wildlife Conservation Law, Community Forest Law, National Policy, Measure and Action Plan of Coastal Resource and Environment Management, National Plan for Mangrove and Coral Reef, National Management Plan and Action Plan for Coastal Agriculture. Next, please. Next, please. So for the climate change policy, the climate change master plan has already been set up from 2015 to 2050. in central policy document. For example, the climate change master plan focus on framework of policies and action plans, provide a vision to achieve climate resilient and low carbon goals in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, especially Goal 13. Climate Change Act, this one is ongoing, facilitate coordinated action across the government. We do have National Climate Change Policy Committee with authority to prepare policies, regulations, and other measures. We do have citizens' right specified to be informed, to improve resilience, to engage government on climate change action, and also to receive support. And last one, the government must evaluate and assess climate change impact and private public information and warning, sponsor research, develop adaptation technology and innovation to adapt climate change policies in various sections. Next one, please. So on the Climate Change Act, we do have National Climate Change Policy Committee. We do have Thai Meteorological Department, and also we create a climate change mitigation fund. Next, please. Next. We do have different kinds of organizations in Thailand that has been involved, like National Environment Board, National Climate Change Committee, Ministry of Natural Resources has all departments involved, Thai Meteorological Department and Office of the Water Resources. Next, please. Next. So interesting one now is we try to illustrate actions and climate change. The first one is nature-based solutions. Second is energy sector. Third is life in cities and sea level rise and extreme weather events. So for the nature-based solutions, we do have a broad overlap between nature protection and climate change action, and NBS, mean national-based solutions, can apply to approximately 1/3 climate change challenges. So now all the development bank is using this concept for providing fund. The other one is national sector strategies for applying NBS needed. The Thai Prime Minister, during the last COP26, I think we do reiterate national target of 100 million new trees by the end of 2022. So if done correctly, will produce million benefits, carbon sink, local climate regulation, increased biodiversity, local economic boost, and others. So this is a very good challenge. The other one is national parks and other protected area cover nearly 20% of Thailand. Improved management will enhance their nature and climate change benefit. The other one is agriculture is a major component of Thai economy, improving water management, drainage, reducing pesticides, percentage of fertilizers, and other NBS actions when needed. Next, please. For the energy sectors, well, this is a very important one. Selected national energy plan climate change 2036 goal have been set up. National Energy Plan 2022, Alternative Energy Development Plan 2018-2037, Power Development Plan, and we do have 6,000 megawatt of electricity generated by solar and 3,000 megawatt of electricity generated by wind. We do promote the use of electronic vehicles, 25% share of renewable energy in fuel consumption of transportation sector, and non-hydroelectric renewables target of 18.7 gigawatts of total capacity by 2037. we do hope that 30%, 37% of the power mix in 2037 from non-fossil fuel sources. And Thailand has one of the world's biggest floating hydro solar hybrid projects on the surface of a reservoir. This is a very highlight on the renewable energy of Thailand, and plans to replicable of all 8 more dams by 2037, generating 2,725 megawatts. Please, next. So besides this, we do have more challenge, like fossil fuels account for almost 80% of current power mix. And we do have a problem with the still upcoming coal projects, threaten both national climate and environmental objective, as well as international obligations of NDC, national determined contributions. Another one is conventional thermal generation will remain the largest contribute to Thailand's power mix to 2030 with minor abatement. The other one is the support on hydropower development by neighboring countries. We do support Laos PDR in having environmental impact, even though the projects are still climate friendly. The other one is improving education system to produce climate change energy skills and general climate change energy awareness. This is important one. Next, please. Next slide, please. For life in cities, I think life in cities, urban areas are a microcosm of climate change, environment challenge, and opportunities. We do have action in life in the cities like climate change, urban plans like Bangkok Master Plan on climate change. We do have country planning, developing resilience criteria, and also indicators of a monitoring and evaluation framework for spatial planning. We do research and innovation, strengthening urban climate governance to inclusive, resilient, and sustainable societies in Thailand. And also we hope that we can increase 1.5 million electric vehicles by 2035. Next, please. Next slide, please. So the challenge in life in the cities is we have to relentless development, solid waste and water supply management, plastic pollutions. We do have a lot of program on microplastic and even nanoplastics monitoring. Air pollution well above international health limits. We have 7 square meter of green space per capita in Bangkok, as WHO recommended minimum of 9 square meters. So we still have to do more green. Heat traps and skills capacity. Next, please. For sea level rise and extreme weather events impact of the 2011, as you may know, we have a very severe flood, 13 million people affected and 680 killed, 46 billion US dollars lost. This is about $8 billion, especially in Bangkok. Next, please. So Bangkok and the Lower Chao Phraya Basin projected to face extreme on the flood and also mid-century because of the storms and sea level rise. So conversely, worsening dry season drought may also decrease irrigated rice by nearly 1/3. Next, please. So for the level of private sector and civil society, I'm very pleased to say that now civil society are so much aware of climate change, and GCNT is Global Compact Network of Thailand. They set up the Forum 2021 and Thailand's Climate Leadership Summit 2021 on the theme A New Era of Accelerated Actions, was the country's first leadership summit on solutions to climate change. And the event welcomed more than 800 participants from the public and private sector, civil societies, and the United Nations in Thailand also support this event. So GNT has a very good support from the CP group. A huge amount of money has been used for strengthening capacity building for the private sectors in Thailand. Next, please. For the another NGOs, I think we do have a role of private sector on like bird conservation. In Thailand, the group working with local communities and government to enhance benefits from coastal wetlands like carbon sequestration, climate resilience, environmental protection, economic returns from ecotourism, local recreation, and nature education. So this generates a very good income for the people in the local area. Next, please. Next. Next slide, please. Okay, so in conclusions, I would like to say that Thailand is trying our best to come up with the plan for reducing carbon. And we have a very good opportunity to bring all the stakeholders joining hands, government, non-government, private sectors, and both at the national and local level. Besides that, we are very thankful for the international organizations to join hands with us. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sinatara Tabukanan Kakunka. Thank you so much for the very comprehensive also presentation on what Thailand has been doing and will keep doing to trying to protect the environment and reduce emission. I'm really interested and I think it's really impressive that Thailand is in the process of planting 1 million new trees to improve the environment, hopefully other countries and also assisting neighboring countries on environmental policies. So I will have some questions to ask you later in the Q&A session. So next, may I welcome Ms. Barbara Fenimore to join us to make your presentation, please.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me today. Welcome to all the distinguished panelists and guests. I also have a PowerPoint presentation. If you can cue it up, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. The speakers before me have done a tremendous job of describing what can be done by the NGO sector and also the government. So I feel I have little to add to that, but I will do my best. But if you move to the next slide, I'd like to start by talking about the impacts of climate change on the Asia Pacific region. So may I have the next slide, please? Well, I believe that Asia and the Asia Pacific region is key both to the extent of climate change and also the solutions to climate change. The future of our planet really depends to a large extent on Asia. As you can see in this slide, the amount of CO2 emissions coming from Asia and the Pacific, primarily China. And without radical change, Asia and the Pacific will have almost half of the world's CO2 emissions, and also its energy use and its non-CO2 emissions as well. Next slide, please. And the impacts are going to be very costly for the Asia Pacific. We're already seeing that. Asia is one of the regions of the world that is most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. There are already more people displaced from extreme weather in Asia than any other place in the world. And also several of the top 10 cities in the world that are most vulnerable to sea level rise are also in the Asia Pacific region. And as you've heard through, or you will hear, in many of the side panels through this wonderful conference, women and children and girls are often among the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, in large degree because of their poverty and their lack of equal opportunity and the geographic regions where they are located, and also because of their responsibilities for the family, and in many areas their very strong reliance on natural resources that are being decimated. So this is the sad truth of what's happening. Climate change is not something that's coming in the future. We saw in the polls that Dr. Chen's group has run, and people understand that climate change is already happening right now. Next slide, please. Just another example. People don't realize the impacts of climate change on agriculture. How many people go to bed hungry every night in Asia and the Pacific, and they are going to be even more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. You can see in the map here which countries and which regions of Asia Pacific have high exposure to climate change risk and a very low ability to adapt to those impacts. Next slide, please. But what I think I'd like to mention and highlight that people don't often understand, climate change is just not just a one-time extreme weather events that we're seeing more and more. It's gradual, but relentless impact on people's health. And I think when we talk about climate change, it's important to make that link, not just to natural systems and biodiversity, which we're seeing that link made more and more, but also to people's health, to women's health, to children's health. And I think this slide does a very good job of showing how the rising temperatures, which are leading to more extreme weather, and rising sea levels are also increasing air pollution, leading to asthma, leading changes in disease that we're seeing more and more. Mosquito-borne disease are going to be in places we never saw them before. Respiratory disease, malnutrition. In fact, climate change is what we call a threat multiplier. All the threats to our planet that we're seeing right now are all connected and are all exacerbated already by climate change. We're seeing that with increased drought-stricken areas, leading to more climate migrants. That is going to only increase unless we make drastic changes right now. So next slide, please. This Asian Development Bank estimates the amount of money that's going to be needed in Asia Pacific to help adapt to the current impacts of climate change, and also to help with mitigation to reduce climate change emissions as best we can, because every fraction of a degree matters, and we have to act. This is a tremendous amount of money, as you can see, but when compared to the annual damage of almost $50 billion a year caused by disasters in Asia and the Pacific, it's really not as much. Now, in the next slide, please. I think this is really important because we were asked to discuss how can governments balance environmental protection with the economy. And I think it's not really a balancing act. In fact, it's not that it's a choice between sustainable economy and the current economy. because there is only a sustainable economy. There is no other way to continue to grow, for Asia Pacific countries to continue, in many cases, their economic miracle. It's important not to look at the expenses of making the transition to a net zero economy as costs. Rather, they should be thought of as investments in our future, investments that are going to reap many, many benefits, including to human health, as well as the more quantifiable benefits of clean energy to the economy and fewer extreme weather events and damages. So look at this slide here, because what you'll see is that as the temperature rises, the climate action path actually has much fewer economic damages, and the cost of business as usual of a 4.4 degree temperature rise there is just 18% of GDP. So what is needed now is bold action to make that transition in a way that is going to avoid the worst consequences of climate change, while helping countries to make that transition. We've already heard what Thailand is doing, and it's, as you say, very impressive, and other countries can do the same. Next slide, please. In fact, I'd like to use Taiwan as a case study. There's been a wonderful study, a recent study by Deloitte Economics Institute that just compares what Taiwan's economy stands to lose from climate change impacts versus what it stands to benefit. And what this study estimates is that Taiwan would lose some 1.4 trillion US dollars in its economy through business as usual. So when you compare, when you're looking at how can a government justify making investments in that carbon future, often they don't look at and compare it to the costs of inaction, which are almost always greater. And what are they for Taiwan? $1.4 trillion. Now let's look at the next slide and compare it to the benefits of moving to net zero, a 1.5 degree. 1.3 trillion benefits. And these benefits to Taiwan can be realized immediately, according to this study, by making bold decisions now to change the trajectory of Taiwan away from fossil fuels to clean energy, and to make other decisions to green its cities and countryside. Next slide, please. And here's just an infographic to show the 4 phases of changes in Taiwan that can really allow it to take advantage of its significant strengths in innovation, in advanced manufacturing, and to use those strengths to become a force for the world in making those transitions to cleaner and greener technologies. The time to take advantage and reap those benefits is now, with this rapid and bold climate action. And the benefits will be felt immediately in certain industries, from clean energy to construction to transportation. And then as time goes on, they will be more widespread. And any of the impacts of making those structural transitions will be more than offset by these benefits. So this is a very hopeful study. I think it's been replicated for many, many countries in Asia Pacific and around the world, even in China, which I'm sorry to say, has begun to move back to its old mindset of relying on coal to power its economic recovery, rather than doubling down on its significant advances in renewable energy. Many studies, a recent study has shown that China can and should have an orderly retirement of its most polluting, carbon intensive and inefficient coal plants and coal mines now, in order to avoid millions of dollars in stranded assets when these coal plants are no longer needed. They're not even really needed now. So this is the kind of change in mindset that is the most important thing for countries, for corporations, for governments, for civil societies, and for individuals to make. That is the hardest thing, because every kind of change that we need to make, the science shows we can do it, but vested interests and reliance on old ways are hindering. So the most important thing is the change in mindset and the decision that nobody can make this change alone, that we have to act together and we have to act collaboratively. Those are the two biggest changes that civil society can help to bring about if we're really going to make it through this narrow window and in this decisive decade. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we've heard a lot already of very concrete actions, things that civil society can do to accelerate climate action. And I would just then, it's highlighting some of those here as well. Choose climate goals and actions for high impact. And really the highest impact, I think, is to work to move away from fossil fuels, because in so many countries, what we're seeing is the powerful fossil fuel industry is resisting change in any way that it can. It's been happening for decades. The disinformation continues to grow, and we have to defend the truth to show that this is the 19th century technology. We need to move to the 21st century. So that's what I encourage all civil society to really look at. What can they do to help push forward the transition away from fossil fuels, even though that's only the beginning of the kind of changes that need to be made. But strategic action plans can help, not just ones that change individuals' carbon footprint, but also to change the systems upon which are helping to perpetuate this climate disaster that we are facing today. Help elect local officials who support climate action, whether it be local governments, regional governments, national governments. Civil society can help mobilize people to make those, support those people who need to do it, and to push corporations to make change. So many times the bottom line is still almighty, and no, corporations need to take a much more long-range perspective on what's good for their bottom line, not just the short-term profits. And collaboration, as I said before, is so important. I was so delighted to see Dr. Chen's sustainable platform in Taiwan, where his group has collaborated with dozens and dozens of stakeholders from every walk of society. That's what needs to be done, because everybody has a role to play, and nobody could do it alone. And then I just want to say, in all of these actions, what civil society can do is to model and promote the principles of climate justice that are so much a focus of this conference today and going forward. And next slide, please. These are a wonderful listing of the principles of climate justice that have been developed by Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, and her group, Climate Justice. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in this commissions, and I'll just mention a couple right here. Ensure that decisions on climate change are participatory, transparent, and accountable. And that applies to the actions and decisions of the civil society group itself, as well as those of the government. I worked for a US-based NGO for 40 years, and I know that every time we move forward in that participatory, transparent, and accountable way with our partners, and really pushed the government to do the same, that's when we made a difference. And so partnerships are so important. Education, again, we heard about so much from Dr. Chen at every level is going to make a difference. And of course, highlighting gender equality and equity, because as I said before, not only are women and girls some of the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, but they are also the ones who are already at the front lines of making a difference, who have access to creative and innovative solutions, and their voices need to be heard. There need to be more women in decision-making roles in the climate arena at every level of government, in industry, corporations, and civil society. That studies have shown that when women are in these positions of leadership, better climate laws and regulations and programs are enacted. So that may be the single most important thing that everybody can focus on and is focusing on in this conference. Next slide, please. So we're at a choice here. We are already seeing horrific climate impacts, but it's not too late if we act now, because what we've seen is human ingenuity has solved some very difficult problems over our millennia, and we will continue to do so if we can have that political will and work together. There's nothing that we can't do. Next slide, please. And we owe it to our children and to future generations, because their future is in our hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fenimore, for your presentation, and also your bringing up that there's a need for more women in the leadership role in advocating for strong environmental policy and the net zero emission endeavor. I completely agree with you that when women is taking the leadership role, it really benefits moving forward into protecting our environment. And I also agree with you that with the climate change really seriously affects people's health. I agree with the slides that you presented. Actually, in the past 2 days, the air in Taiwan on the whole island was not very good, and actually affected people's ability to breathe and also conduct their work effectively, because they're not feeling well, and people were asking. Because of the pandemic situation, people were already wearing facial masks outside. However, whenever around this season, before COVID, the administration would ask people with allergies and breathing problems to wear their facial mask because to protect their health. So thank you so much for your presentation. And finally, I see Congressman Case with us. So I'm very happy that Congressman, you are taking your precious time to on the panel on the substantial carbon reduction. So without further ado, the floor is yours, sir. Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me this time?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about our technical problems. Every single computer in my office had the same problem. So it wasn't me, it was my computers. We think that they had trouble adjusting to Google Meets, although I don't know why. Anyway, here I am, and I have been able to listen to most of the presentations. And the first thing I want to say is I've just really enjoyed each and all of them. I mean, from each of the panelists, the engagement of civil society on Taiwan, the approach of building from the ground up a consensus to act on climate change, the structural plans and laws passed in Thailand to really move this forward in a cohesive way, and the passion of illustrating what the actual issues are and how you can, trade short term for long term, but you can't get away with it for long. All really valuable. So I'm not sure what I can add to all of this, but I'll try to do something. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. It's really an honor to participate with all of you in this forum and speak to how government policy can address the issue of climate change. In fact, must address the issue of climate change. I'm sorry. Special thanks to the.
Sorry, Congressman, can you turn on your microphone again? Sorry, can you turn on your microphone again?
Okay.
There
it is. Thank
okay.
you.
I know. I'm not sure why it went off. Okay. I may not get all the way through this. No, I see where it is. It's just going off by itself. So how much did I miss there?
About 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds.
Okay. Well, I was just trying to say thank you to the Asia Pacific Liberal Women's Association and to my constituent, Josephine Wolsteg, who is responsible for me being with you. While I'm here today, I do want to speak to government policy on a substantial carbon reduction, but I want to endorse everything that's already been said about the necessity of civil society being a critical piece of this puzzle. And your CWS forum is an excellent way to engage stakeholders on the questions and issues that are currently under consideration. We really are only going to be effective if we build consensus within civil society, the broad civil society. This cannot be something that the government, in most parts of the country and world at least, that government can mandate from the top down and really make stick over time. It's got to be built throughout civil society and have critical buy-in from everybody who is affected in one way or the other. I want to just briefly cover a couple of points. My first point, governments obviously have policy choices to make in tackling climate change. Number two, international cooperation is at the end of the day key to addressing the climate crisis. And number three, our Asia Pacific region that we all live and work and breathe in is critical to climate action for a variety of reasons, not only because of our geographic expanse, but because of the practical reality that many of the larger industrial countries of our world are in the Asia Pacific, and many of the emitters of carbon dioxide are in the Pacific. So if we can't solve this in the Asia Pacific, we're certainly gonna live by the consequences. And then finally, what's already been pointed out, which is that women and girls play an important role in climate policy. So to my first point, I'm going to focus a little bit on the United States and give you my view of a report on my country right now and what we're doing and perhaps not doing. We all know the basics. The recent report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change stated that some of the impacts of climate change are already irreversible, but that holding the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius will reduce the scale of the harm. Last year, the United States experienced $145 billion in damage from weather and climate disasters. I think by anybody's estimation, the scale of those disasters, from flooding to hurricanes to the worst year for wildfires and some of the worst years for drought in our country, are all attributable in one way, shape, or form to climate change. So there's clearly been a major impact on climate change in the United States. And of course, across the globe, especially in the Asia Pacific, where we are many of us island states and island jurisdictions, 1 billion people are at risk of losing their homes by some estimations from climate change. And so, as was already said, unless we get to the solutions very, very fast, the options for societies to adapt become very, very limited. And I like the prior speaker's description of this as a very narrow window. The President Biden, of course, has committed the United States as one country in the world and one of the top emitters in the world to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. And I believe that we must reach that goal by any means achievable. In the United States Congress, we've taken a number of steps over recent years to try to get us there. One of the things seems pretty simple and straightforward to express, but so it's surprising that we hadn't done it previously. And that is that in 2019, we created in the U.S. House the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. So we, of course, like many of you, operate out of committees, but we had never created a committee that was completely devoted to the climate crisis, where it was responsible for pulling together all of the strands of the crisis and how to tackle the crisis from a number of different levels. So from environmental protection requirements to tax policy that implemented climate-related reforms, or for that matter, didn't, net zero emission requirements, to carbon reduction, carbon pricing schemes, to really helping those that are reliant on the fossil fuel industry today to transfer to other industries. We tried to pull that all together into one place rather than have it spread out all over Congress. And this has really started to really organize our thinking in terms of how we go about climate change on a big picture, macro level. The Select Committee on the Climate Crisis produced a quite voluminous report about a year and a half ago. We had 700 some odd proposals for individual action of one way, shape, or form. You can check this all out on the web. And we have now implemented somewhere around 200 of those 700 have been signed into law. We have passed a number of others in the House that are not out of the Senate yet. But nonetheless, it is again given us an organized pathway forward to try to think about this in the big picture, long term, and to achieve the individual steps across the board that are going to be necessary for us to get there. We've also started to invest a lot more money in the climate crisis than even a couple of years ago. We passed in November a bill which we refer to as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, sometimes known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Plan, which was for us a generational reinvestment in our broader infrastructure. And in that bill, we took on climate change in particular and tried to reinvest in areas that had some bearing on climate change in some way, shape, or form, whether it be clean energy, whether it be more efficient transmission grids, whether it be more efficient transportation systems that didn't suck up fossil fuels. The price tag of that was somewhere in the range of $550 billion US, which was our largest investment in climate change ever. Clearly not enough, but certainly it was our largest investment. We also have another bill that has been pending, referred to as Build Back Better Act, which is President Biden's signature social infrastructure bill, which contains even more far-reaching desires to tackle climate change on several levels. That has not cleared Congress yet, but that would be our largest climate change bill. We also are working on a bill right now that will invest in our energy research infrastructure and manufacturing capabilities, which could well scale up the availability of carbon reducing technology in the United States, and also together with other countries in the world, the overall technology that would be available for carbon reductions across the world. This is, of course, an area where science can lead us in many ways. The House version of this bill, the America Competes Act, also integrated climate policy far more into our diplomacy. So where perhaps we had not placed climate change at the center of our diplomacy in terms of our relations with other countries in the world, this bill would do that, would highlight climate change and the climate crisis and solutions necessary in our own internal and external diplomacy. We, of course, have a number of policy tools left that we have not pursued yet that I believe we should. We can set and enforce much tougher standards for industry. We have questions as to managing our land use conservation, government procurement, investing in subsidizing green technology, and creating systems that harness market forces to reduce carbon emissions. So in my view, the unfinished business on a domestic front is really carbon pricing, carbon reduction schemes that thus far have proven difficult to pass politically. But I think that their time is rapidly approaching. I have championed in my own work one area specific to climate change, and that is ocean conservation, because we all know that as we look out across the world, perhaps it's easy to see the air in Taipei or Los Angeles or many other parts of the world, or to perceive the consequences of climate change with eroding shorelines. But one place we don't see it is our oceans. And nonetheless, our oceans serve not only as one of the largest carbon sinks in the entire planet, and they're critical from that perspective, but they also are deeply affected by climate change, especially the warming of the oceans, which is devastating our marine life, as well as ocean acidification from changing atmospheres, which are having the same impact. And so really, when we look at climate change and the policies that we need to pursue, we can't forget our oceans. The policies are going to be pretty much the same. You've got to get the carbon out of the air and stop putting it into the air and start providing places where it can actually be absorbed to the point in Thailand, as I saw in your slide, to plant 100 million, was it, new trees, which we can probably all stand to do, and obviously other means. But the point is that the oceans are a critical part of this that we are pursuing. In fact, in the United States House of Representatives, we have developed a climate change bill that is focused on the ocean. So it's a collection of initiatives that we've pulled together into the Oceans-Based Climate Solutions Act. And that is one part of the solution to the oceans, another part being that we have to stop fishing them so much, but that's another story. So there's a whole host of policy options that we have. And of course, the problem is not, I don't think the problem is knowing what the options are. The problem is choosing the best ones and pursuing them. And that's where most of the world is really falling short, is actually, taking the tough stuff and really, rather than nibbling around the edges of the climate crisis, actually going after concrete areas such as carbon dividends, carbon pricing that create the market incentives or compulsion to actually reduce carbon and get us all into another way of looking at it, which brings us to international cooperation. Because here's the bottom line: unless we all do it, we're not all going to do it. And if some of us, and I don't excuse my country, by the way, if some of us don't do it, then that disadvantages the rest of the world who are paying a price to do it. And so really the only way to do this is to have international understandings that have some realm of international enforcement to them, or international understanding of consequences if you don't enforce them, where no country can opt out and therefore continue to burn coal or continue to not have efficient electricity systems or any other number of things. I think that's I think we all know that that's what is ultimately necessary. And so from that perspective, it was to me a tragedy that our country did opt out of the Paris Accords, and it was a very positive development that we opted back in last year, and of course that has led to international conferences getting back on track, such as Glasgow, to set the goal of reaching global net zero emissions by 2050, which are all positive developments. But again, I think also the notation of international agreements, such as between the United States and PRC on a joint declaration on enhancing climate action. I mean, we are, those two countries, the largest, not only the largest possible solutions, but today some of the largest problems. And so if we can actually reach those kinds of agreements, that's better than us going our separate ways. Now, all of this has to translate, of course, into action and agreements that actually have the impacts that we all seek. But it's better to start with the agreement to agree internationally and then try to get to the agreement than not to do it at all. I spoke, that takes me back to the Asia Pacific, because that's, like I said, where I think much of this action is going to be. We all know that this is one of our most vulnerable regions to climate change throughout the entire world. I live in Hawaii, where we are impacted by sea level rise in spades. We have beautiful air, so that's nice, and we don't have any, coal in the ground, but we still burn some. We still burn some of our electricity off of the importation of coal, which we are about to cease in a few months. And we certainly have seen the impacts of climate change in our oceans. It is very, very clear that if we continue at the current rate, we will see substantial increases in carbon emissions in the Asia Pacific region, somewhere around 34% in the next decade or less, if we continue over 2010 levels, if we continue at this rate. So there's nothing about the Asia Pacific that exempts us. In fact, the consequences of not acting are going to be far more severe in the Asia Pacific than many parts of our world. And so we all have an interest in working towards these harder international solutions that we have to do both domestically and internationally. And so I think it's important for us to kind of understand the stakes for us in our own backyard. This is one of the reasons why President Biden pledged to increase U.S. bilateral climate financing, which is part of the solution. You've got to have money to go with these solutions. We promised to increase our financing for international availability to $5.7 billion. And many of us have led initiatives in our country to ensure that our country, through USAID, the Development Finance Corporation, the Department of State, really mobilizes funding for a broader climate resilience approach in the Asia Pacific region. Finally, I just want to close by emphasizing the importance, because we are still within a few days of International Women's Day, and of course this is tied to that. And many of you have spoken to the role of women and girls in the discussions that we're having. Obviously, this is a critically important role for women and girls throughout our world. Unfortunately, women often experience the worst impacts of climate change. Disasters, drought, instability can exacerbate economic inequalities faced by women around the globe. Women farmers produce somewhere between 60 to 80% of the food in most developing countries. They are obviously impacted in that by climate change, as well as a whole range of other areas. And yet, as has already been pointed out, women are often underrepresented in the development of climate policy, and this should be changed. And so, we need far more women scientists leading research for climate solutions, more women crafting policy, more support for women leaders in civil society that will be key to seeing sustainable policies implemented. And forums like this obviously elevate women's voices to make our climate policy stronger. We actually have recognized this rather in the US Congress. One of my colleagues introduced a bill which is referred to as the Women in Climate Change Act. I'm a co-sponsor of that bill. And this bill targets everything that we are talking about here today. It targets not only the impacts of climate change on women and girls, the disproportionate impacts, but also the ways forward to accomplish, in our country at least, many of the things that we've already talked about. It calls for a federal interagency working group on women and climate change within the U.S. Department of State, and it would require the Office of Global Women's Issues of our Department of State to submit a strategy to prevent and respond to the effects of climate change on women. So translating what we all know innately and what we all can recognize empirically into actual recognition and focus in government. So in conclusion, as has already been pointed out, the time is running out, but choices can be made to mitigate those impacts, to get through the narrow window successfully. We do have clear options of policy. It's not a surprise what we have to do. We each of us in our own countries have to take action domestically to increase education and knowledge and support for climate change related policies, and then we have to implement those policies. And then I would also say we have to, as part of implementing those policies, recognize those who will be the most impacted by those policies and find some way to make them part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So I think, for example, of the coal industry in West Virginia, in my country, which obviously would be impacted as we moved away from coal. Now, are we going to just ram that down their throat? I don't think that that's actually going to work. I think what we have to do is say, we understand your issues. We are going to help you to transition to another economy. We are going to subsidize. We're going to transfer, and that makes them allies rather than political enemies. And that's what it's going to take, at least in my country. We can't go it alone, and it's been disturbing that still many countries are not fully embracing international agreements with some effect, at least. It's one thing to sign pledges, but it's another thing to actually, commit to action that gets you to those pledges. We're all in the Asia Pacific, so I look forward to doing it in the Asia Pacific, and I look forward to doing it with a lot more women and children. So thank you for that, and sorry again for the technological difficulties.
Thank you very much, Congressman Case. I especially am happy about the introduction of the Women and Climate Change Act that you mentioned. That will have substantial effect on women's involvement in issues so important as climate change, and also better women's situation under climate change. I'll let the congressman rest a bit because you talked for a while. I see some of the participants having a few questions for you, but I will first move on to Dr. Seratana Tapukanan. You mentioned a bit about Thailand and BCG and women's involvement. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the Thai policy to combat climate change and also the women's involvement from Thailand. Can you share that with us, please?
Well, thank you for the questions about women and BCG, biocircular economy. As you may know, that Thailand is going to be the host of the APEC meeting this coming November. And the government has put lots of efforts to promote the BCG concept. And we do realize that women play a very important role in all activities, especially climate change. And BCGs are focusing based on the sufficiency economy philosophy of our late Majesty King Bhumibol, that we focus on moderation, reasonableness, risk management. And BCG, biocircular economy, I think we trace on the sufficiency economy philosophies. It was introduced by the Thai research community promoted by the Thai government on the new economic model for inclusive and sustainable growth. And with that, we also look at the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. We want to focus on biological diversity, cultural richness, and technology and innovation. So for this coming BCG, I am involved in the preparation of ministerial statement on women and economy, BCG, also in that statement. So we hope that the strategies that we want to highlight on sustainability of biological resources, strengthening communities, and also all grassroots economy, upgrading sustainable competitiveness for that BCGs. We do hope that we will have a side meeting, side event at the APEC women economy and bring in some of the business, women in business, to highlight the business that focus on the BCGs, like how they minimize the carbon or reduce carbon, and trying to build resilience of global changes. I think those are the things that I'm also involving as a president of Asia Pacific Regional Council of the International Council of Women. This is the oldest NGOs related to women in the world. And in the ICW, we usually have climate change sectors, and we do have a handbook for highlighting women and climate change. Those are the things that I think very important. And I'm very happy to know that Mr. Tim Nelson mentioned about the bill related to women and climate change. I think that is a very interesting one. If you can maybe in the future highlight more, so that we would like to encourage all countries in the Asia and the Pacific to come up with this kind of initiatives. So I hope that in the next APEC, we will do our best to promote the role of women and climate change and also BCGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Congressman Case, you actually have 3 questions. We have just a few minutes left, so I'll ask the questions in one setting. One participant is asking about the U.S. on achieving net zero, as for example, Taiwan and other countries had aimed to achieve net zero by 2050. So the participant is asking if the US also has a timeline for that. And secondly, another participant is asking about whether on international cooperation and whether the US government has done enough to provide dedicated budgets to serve as one of the leaders of combating climate change. And thirdly, one participant is asking about carbon tax legislation and where Congress is on that specific legislation. So Congressman Case.
So thank you. Well, President Biden did commit and pledge to the same timeframe as you've already mentioned. That was a pledge of our country to that timeframe. He's also pledged to increments on that timeframe as well. So we're under the same basic commitments as others are, and clearly in Glasgow, we're all trying to get everybody on the same page to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. Because again, back to the point, if one country can get there faster, great. But the fact of the matter is that if in most countries' minds, you'll pay that price as other people do the same thing, because otherwise you feel that you are somehow disadvantaged if the rest of the world is not doing the same. And so the value of a common pledge as a common denominator is invaluable. And if countries out, and there are countries out there that are way far forward from the rest of the world, and they should be encouraged. If they can pull it off, great. In terms of dedicated budgets, well, we as I was trying to kind of describe, we do have a much larger level of dedicated budgets to climate change in one way, shape, or form. The investment that I laid out with the bill that we just passed in November was the largest investment we have ever put down, and $550 billion. And so US, now we've got a big economy and a big budget. So one could argue, and I would probably agree with them, that 550 billion is not enough. However, it's at least more than it was. And I think it's a significant amount of money. We've also pledged more money than that in our budget for international efforts and international assistance that do assist either directly or indirectly with climate change. Because if we can help a relatively small country, for example, with relatively limited resources, not only with implementing their own climate change mechanisms, but with the consequences of doing that economically, then that's a good investment for us and for everybody else. We're not going to be able to shift some countries if the consequences to them are so dire to go through climate change related changes that they can't do it. It's very tough for them to do that unless they have that assistance. And then finally on carbon tax, we definitely have carbon tax legislation pending, carbon tax, carbon dividend, kind of carbon pricing schemes. They are supported by many of us, myself included, but we do not yet have the political consensus in the United States to pass them. That's the honest answer. I think it's going in the right direction. It would definitely help if we could enforce or agree on an international basis that basically everybody's going to do the same thing along those lines. But unfortunately, we're not there yet, but it's definitely on the table.
Thank you very much, Congressman Case. We only have a few minutes left, so I will ask the participants the last question. This is direct to Ambassador Jian and Ms. Fenimore. On your work on the process of carbon reduction and also with climate change, are big corporations and industry the most difficult challenge that both of you face to trying to achieve your goal? Ambassador Chen, would you like to take a stab at that first?
Okay, I think right now Taiwan's big corporations, they are very keen to solve the problem about the carbon reduction. However, the most difficult part for Taiwan right now is lack of the professional people to do the job. Most people understand what is the idea about the carbon reduction. They don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it according to the international regulation and with international third parties accreditation. So right now, from my point and my NGO doing the job is that we push very hard to educate the new generation about the people who can deal with the sustainability and carbon reduction. I think it may take about 2 or 3 years. We do have enough people to do the job. In the meantime, because we have the cooperations with universities, we have the agreement with the 38 universities. Right now, they are also very keen to provide the education for the new generation of the university graduate. For most of the graduates before, they have no idea about how to do the job for the carbon reduction. It's not easy job. It's not can just say, hey, I can do it. You must have some very technical and very clearly working orders. So I think the most difficult job for the big corporation, a small corporation, the difficult part is the same, lack of enough professional people.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Jen. Ms. Van Moor, would you like to share your opinion? Ms. Van Moor, did we lose you?
No, she did not turn on the microphone.
Oh, there she is.
I turned it on. I turned it on. I'll answer with respect to China, where I have worked for the past 30 years. And the issue is not working with big corporations in general, it's really with the fossil fuel industry. And to just touch on a question that one of the other participants asked, China is not exempt from having to cut its CO2 emissions. Under the Paris Agreement, none of the nearly 200 countries that signed the Paris Agreement is exempt. What it does is call on every country to set its own goals for reducing carbon emissions. And China has done so. It pledged to peak its CO2 emissions before 2030 and to reach net zero by 2060. That is kind of at risk right now because of the fossil fuel industry is pushing the old mindset of saying that the only way to deal with China's economic recovery is to build more coal plants and to reopen old coal mines. And that is even despite the fact that 1/3 of all solar and all wind installations in the world are in China. The fossil fuel industry and the state grid, the world's largest utility, does not want to connect that wind and solar plants because it's not as profitable. So what we're seeing now is a real challenge, a real competition in China for the ear of the government for how China can move ahead to ensure common prosperity, which it wants to do. And the fossil fuel industry is a big part of the problem. But as Congressman Case said, I was heartened by the U.S.-China joint agreement at the COP26 meeting in Glasgow last December, in which, among other things, the two countries pledged to work together to cut emissions of the second most important greenhouse gas of methane. And I think this shows goodwill on the part of both countries, and they have agreed to come up with strict action plans and to come back to the next climate meeting with concrete measures to cut methane. And so I think that, which is a super potent greenhouse gas, 80 times more potent as the as CO2. So even though it doesn't stay as long in the atmosphere, but if if the two countries can really move forward to cut emissions of methane, I think that's going to give us a lot more breathing room in the short-term climate impacts that we need in order to drive that net zero transition everywhere.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fenimore. So that wraps up our side event, government policy and substantial carbon reduction. I really want to thank all the speakers for joining us and spending time with us on this really important issue. From this panel, I really think that we have made good progress on protecting the environment and reduce carbon emission. However, at the same time, we know that there's a lot of work ahead of us, and especially the involvement of women and girls. So Congressman Pace, Ambassador Jen, Ms. Fenimore, and Dr. Tuvakanan, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you very much for Ambassador Yang Huang for the invitation and convening this really important panel. So we'll see you next year. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Excuse me, can we turn on the